Another night, another blowout victory for the New York Mets. Is Luisangel Acuña affording Francisco Lindor more time to rest with how well he's playing shortstop right now? I'll talk about that more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, I just want to open up the show today and give my deepest gratitude to the Washington Nationals. I went out there to DC with my dad to celebrate his birthday, go on our, annual baseball road trip, and we caught a great series in the beginning of June when the Mets swept the Nationals. At the time, the Mets looked nothing like a playoff team, but there was a little bit of hope. Maybe there was that players-only meeting a week before that had spurred something. We were just all in wait-and-see mode. And since then, the Mets have been the best team in baseball. But we really had to thank Washington because in their 13 matchups against the Nationals, the Mets won 11 games, and they nearly outscored them by 50 runs. A lot of it came from the last two games where the Mets outscored the Nationals by a score of 20-1. But overall in the season, the Mets scored 86 runs against the Nationals. They scored 37 against the Mets. So thank you, Washington. Your service was much needed. We appreciate it, especially considering the fact that they beat the Braves 8 times. Just a great year for the Mets and the Nationals. Hopefully that we can do it again in 2025. Getting more specifically into the game tonight, it was just a repeat, really, of yesterday. Great pitching performance by the starter tonight, Jose Quintana, even better than Tyler McGill on Tuesday, and an absolute bludgeoning of a left-handed pitcher for the Nationals. Tonight it was DJ Hers and then into the bullpen. The Mets had one really big inning, their biggest inning of the season in the bottom of the fourth, where they scored a whopping 9 runs. Crazy thing, DJ Hers looked good in the first 3 innings. He allowed just 1 hit and 1 walk, and he had struck out the side in the 3rd inning. Well, goes back out for the 4th, walks Brandon Nimmo to lead things off. Pete Alonso gets a base hit. Tyrone Taylor, yet again, delivering a big extra base hit. He doubles to extend his hitting streak to 6 games. He got another hit later in the game as well. That was an RBI double for Taylor, driving in Nimmo, who got a terrible jump, but still was able to score on that play. Mark Vientos comes up. He breaks out of his slump. He gets a base hit to drive in Alonso. Francisco Alvarez, only guy that didn't get into the fun in that inning, he struck out. Then Harrison Bader walked. Luisangel Acuña singled in Vientos. Mets up 4-0. Then Jose Iglesias singled to load the bases. DJ Hers was finally taken out, but a couple of his runs still would come across as Starling Marte singled in 2 more. And then Brandon Nimmo put on the death nail, hit a 3-run homer, finally straightened one out, his 20th of the season, and the Mets grab a 9-0 lead in that inning. And they just cruised from there because Jose Quintana once again was brilliant. 7 shutout innings for Quintana, who's pitching like a guy who you won't be that upset if he gets a playoff start this year, because all of a sudden, he's the best pitcher in baseball. Now, is that sustainable at this level? No. But it's still been a remarkable run. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I did a show after his horrible start against the Orioles where he gave up 7 runs. And I was seeing a lot of comments on YouTube, on social media. Pull Quintana, DFA Quintana. He's been terrible. And I did a podcast breaking down how bad he had been across a 4 to 5 start span, but how the Mets were stuck with him. Because I said, look, you can't DFA this guy. If somebody else gets hurt, and Paul Blackburn did, you're going to need him as depth. You just got to ride it out and hopefully he can figure it out. I had a little bit of optimism that he could settle back in. In no world did I think he would go on the run that he has. which is the longest scoreless inning streak of his career now at 23 and 2/3 innings pitched. And with tonight's 7 scoreless, you look at his last 5 starts, Quintana has given up 1 run across 32 innings pitched. That's a 0.28 ERA. He's attacking the zone. He's got complete command of his pitches. He's got a lot of confidence, and it has been a really insane run. He has taken his ERA from that start after giving up 7 to Baltimore, where it was at 4.57. He's slashed it down to 3.74. It's very hard to nearly take off a run from your ERA when you're 30 starts deep in the season, but you have 5 starts as good as Quintana has. That's exactly what will happen. He's now at a 3.74 ERA again in 30 starts and 166 innings pitched. He's going to get at least one more start here, so probably gets over 170 innings pitched at something below a 4. That's a great season for Jose Quintana. And it's awesome to see what these starters continue to do for this team. And now there's the new tradition. After these guys have a good start, they all huddle around each other in the dugout. They're jumping up and down. They're enjoying each other's success. And all of a sudden, the strength of this team, it's not the lineup. It's the rotation. The starting rotation for the New York Mets has been the best in baseball in September as a team right now this month, including the bullpen. The Mets ERA is 2.13, best mark in the game. They also have the best whip, which is walks and hits over innings pitched at 0.93, and the best average against. So if you are limiting traffic, limiting runs, you're doing a really good job. You look at the last couple turns of the rotation since the beginning of last week in Toronto. You had McGill, 6 shutout. David Peterson, the one bad start of this stretch, gave up 4 and 4 1/3 against the Blue Jays. Then it was 6 2/3 of 1-run ball from Anaya. 7 shutty for Quintana. 6 innings, 3 earned from Severino against the Phillies. An okay start, but still a quality start. Obviously, those home runs given up to Bryce Harper hurt the Mets in the long run, but still, it wasn't a bad outing. And then David Peterson goes 7 2/3, gives up just 1 run the following day. Fortunately, the Mets lost those games. They bounced back. Shaw Manaea against the Nationals, 7 innings, 1 earned run. Then you have 6 innings from McGill, 1 unearned run. And then today, 7 shutty again from Quintana. It's just been a joy to watch these guys go to work. And we'll talk about the Mets versus Phillies series over the weekend in the final segment. They got the edge convincingly in my eyes in 2 of those 4 matchups. So this is going to be fun to watch this rotation try to keep this together and continue to go on this great run for the final stretch of the season here, the last 10 games. But the way they're pitching, you got a lot of confidence that they can do it and really push this team into October, where the Mets are going to be dangerous if they're getting pitching like this. And all of that starter depth, well, that's going to start to filter into the bullpen. This month, the Mets are 12 and 4, the best record in baseball. And to close it out tonight after Quintana, you had a scoreless inning from Phil Maton and a scoreless inning from Huascar Braziban to complete this shutout. There's also one more run from this game that I've not discussed, and that was the 10th run delivered by Luisangel Acuña, who homered in his 2nd straight game. Is Acuña all of a sudden a huge part of this team? It certainly seems like it. And could he continue to start for the rest of this week? I'll talk about how Acuña is affording Lindor time to rest in the next segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on that Luka Doncic rookie or the Ellie De La Cruz or the Patrick Mahomes, it's just not in the cards. I love collecting, but I'm not dropping that much money on a card. But here with Arena Club, you can get their slab packs where it's now possible to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, complete with a view of all possible cards and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is also accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code LockedOnMLB. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB, code LockedOnMLB for 10% off your first purchase. If you haven't yet, check out Locked On New York Sports, our home for post-game reaction shows that go live right after the final out, final buzzer, whatever it is. If you're looking for Mets, Jets, Giants, Yankees, and more, subscribe to Locked On New York Sports. Doesn't impact the show here. Locked On Mets continues exactly how it has all season. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel. Goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, let's talk a little bit about Luisangel Acuña, who is playing like a superstar. It's been unbelievable. He has filled in for Francisco Lindor and matched him on production, which nobody had in the cards. And I'll tell you what, right now, I got egg on my face. I was wrong. I've been tempering your expectations about Acuña all season long because the numbers in AAA were not good. This year, Acuña had a 654 OPS in AAA. He hit 258, got on base at a 299 clip. He did steal 40 bases, but he only hit 7 home runs. And if you look at the amount of qualified hitters there are in the International League, there's 81 guys who have been in the league long enough to be considered qualified hitters, guys who have spent pretty much the whole year in AAA. Do you know where Acuña's OPS ranks among those 81 hitters? 78th. Okay? So my entire assessment of Acuña this season is looking at a player who, since the Mets traded for him, just hadn't been getting it done offensively. Now, what I was always telling you about him is this is a guy that's going to be a good big leaguer because defense, speed, he is going to be an asset to a big league bench for sure. But I wasn't positive if this guy was going to be a starter on a big league team. Well, right now, the way he's playing, he looks like the second baseman of the future. And they talked about it a little bit on the game today. They said maybe this is a guy that was just bored by playing in AAA. Okay. I've been to that ballpark in Syracuse. It's cold. It's muggy. It's not necessarily a fun place to play. It's not Citi Field rocking in a pennant race. Maybe this is a kid that needs that adrenaline, needs that, needs the lights, right? And if that's the case, he's in the perfect place. And what he's done here has been remarkable. He's made 3 starts now. Each of them, he's had a multi-hit game. The only game where he went hitless is where he came in off the bench to replace Lindor and went 0 for 3 on Sunday. But what he's done has been insane. The last 2 nights to go 2 for 4, driving a couple runs each night, hit a home run each time to put the cherry on top of the game and push his team into double digits. It's been really impressive. And he's also handling every play over at shortstop. Really great fundamentals. It's very similar to Lindor out there, fielding the ball, the grounders with 2 hands, coming up firing, good footwork around the bag. It's been fun. Him and Iglesias, you haven't really skipped a beat from your Gold Glove shortstop. Not to say that Acuña is definitely going to be a Gold Glove caliber shortstop in the big leagues, but one of the things that has helped his profile as a prospect is that glove. So now you look at a guy that's hitting 467. He's 7 for 15. What's the rush in getting Lindor back? Yes, Francisco Lindor is the Mets MVP. No doubt about it. But is he going to start on Thursday? I strongly doubt it. Are they going to go because there's a righty on the mound with Taijuan Walker, with Eddie Alvarez at second base again? No chance. You're going to start Acuña and ride the hot hand, and this affords the Mets a little bit of time to really make sure they get Lindor back as close to 100% as possible. I don't know if that's in the cards. He might be playing through some stuff for the rest of the season. But if the Mets got swept by the Nationals, or even if they just lost the first 2 games, Lindor would have been pushing to get into the lineup today. But they win the first 2 games. They blow out the game on Tuesday. Now they blow out another one. Your team's rolling. Brandon Nimmo looks good. He hits a home run. Pete Alonso's starting to swing it. Tyrone Taylor is pushing himself into the starting lineup because he's on fire. Starling Marte's got a hot bat. Jose Iglesias batting leadoff is doing everything. It seems like he's getting 2 hits at least every game. He's got a 12-game hitting streak. Lindor can look at this situation. The Mets can look at this situation they could take a step back and say, you know what? Maybe we should not start him on Thursday, Friday. Who knows? Originally, the timetable for Francisco Lindor was 2 to 3 days. Now, well, actually, there was 2 timetables. They said 2 to 3 days or 3 to 5 days. Well, now he's rested 3 days, and today he did get out there. He stretched, he ran, he threw a little bit, but I don't believe he started to swing the bat, and that's probably the action that's going to cause the most torque on his back if you really think about it. That and bending down for ground balls. So stretching, running, throwing, that's great. He's got to get down, field grounders. He's got to get in the cage, take a bunch of hacks. Why do that on Thursday? Why not have him stretch, run, throw, do the same thing he did today for one more day at least? Maybe extend that to Friday. Let's give him 5 full days. Because if the Mets, beat up Taijuan Walker and win their 5th game in a row without Lindor, well, actually, that'd be the 4th game in a row. Excuse me. Getting ahead of myself. Still, though, if that happens, all right, maybe we rest him one more day. And who knows? Maybe the Mets with Acuña staying red hot, maybe they steamroll the Phillies this weekend and you give Francisco Lindor, instead of just 3 days off, 5 days off, maybe you give him the entire week and the off day on Monday. Have him go into Atlanta as fresh as possible. Obviously, you want Francisco Lindor on the field. But if Acuña's swinging it like this, and he's still giving you that great defense at shortstop, it's not like you're playing Wilmer Flores at shortstop right now. Luisangel Acuña is a damn good shortstop. So he really has been a breath of fresh air, taking what could have been a situation that derailed the Mets season, losing their MVP. And now you got a stopgap who's just on a tear. It's been really impressive. And it reminded me of a couple different situations. Corey Seager in 2015. If you remember, the Mets played the Dodgers in that NLDS. Seager was the hottest thing. He had played 27 games, had a 986 OPS, and he became starting shortstop of the Dodgers in the playoffs because of how well he had played down the stretch. Now, I look back at the numbers. I remembered him being great in that playoff series. He actually wasn't. But still, there's something about a rookie catching lightning in a bottle. Last year, Evan Carter with the Rangers. He played 23 games leading into the playoffs, hit over 300 with an OPS over 1,000. That carried over in October. He was right atop the lineup with Corey Seager, funny enough, doing everything for them. Hit 300 in the playoffs in 17 games, on-base percentage of .417, OPS of .917. Now, I'm not saying that Luisangel Acuña is going to be that level of a player this season, and he's going to start come October. But if Lindor still has issues, if Iglesias cools off, you now have another option that could get some time here. He's really just impressive right now. He's short to the ball. He's spraying line drives everywhere. It's fun to watch him play. So I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I wanted to note, too, when the Mets traded for Acuña, when they traded Scherzer to the Rangers last year, at the time, Luisangel Acuña was hitting .315, .377 on base, .453 slug. So he had an OPS that was not just over 700. No, he had an OPS that was over 800. So he was really thriving in Double-A, had 42 stolen bases on 47 attempts, and it was just over 80 games played. So he was electric. That's why we were also excited when the Mets traded for him. So that guy was in there, but since it came to the Mets, it was a 621 OPS down the stretch in Binghamton last year. And again, the 654 OPS this season. We'll see. This guy could be the second baseman of the future. We don't know, but for now, he is filling in and he is giving Lindor a breather that he desperately needed. So let's see how this plays out. I would bet a lot of money that on Thursday, they're going to roll with Acuña again and have Lindor sit one out. Now, if the Mets lose that game, the Braves win, and you're game up going into Friday, and Lindor is telling you he's good to go, yeah, you go back to Lindor. But if the Mets, again, win another one, and Acuña goes 2 for 4 again, give Lindor some more time. So I think this has been a really interesting development, and we'll see where it goes from here. I will note, as far as your NL wildcard update, everybody else today won. So the Mets didn't gain ground anywhere, but they're still 2 games up on the Braves. They're still even with the Diamondbacks. They're still, 2.5 games back of the Padres. And now they got a really interesting series coming up against the Phillies. I'm going to preview that next. We also have a ton of injury updates. Christian Scott got some horrible news, but there's some more positive ones when you're talking about Kodai Senga, Brett Batty, and Paul Blackburn. So I'll touch on all of those as well as give you that preview in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. And again, this is for all FanDuel customers, not just new customers. You bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to download America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. So today, when we got that bad news on Christian Scott, I went to the insiders first. You can ask me questions anytime. You can take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you can get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's get into that bad news on Christian Scott. He has been shut down for this season and all of next season as well. He unfortunately does need Tommy John surgery. Now, when Scott first went down, this was always the fear. And we were surprised to learn, it's a sprain. But at the same time, you know that still can mean that there's a tear in that UCL. He was trying to ramp back up. And unfortunately, whether something changed, he just wasn't feeling right. If it completely blew, he's now done. And not only is he getting TJ, he's getting the internal brace procedure too. So nowadays, there's sort of 2 Tommy Johns. You have the original Tommy John surgery where they replace that ulnar collateral ligament, or they have the brace surgery where it still is a partially torn UCL, but they brace it essentially. I'm not a doctor. I can't explain it, but it's typically been one of the 2 lately. And we've been seeing a lot of guys get that internal brace procedure. I've never seen or heard of anyone getting both at the same time. So I don't know if Christian Scott I wouldn't imagine he's like the guinea pig. I'm sure they've done this, to other pitchers, but maybe, lesser known guys, or it just hasn't gotten out there. He's basically getting a completely new elbow. The success rate on both of those procedures individually is very high. So you would hope that Christian Scott returns to being himself in 2026, but that's the downside. You lose him for all of next year. So the Mets starter depth next season takes a big hit. We'll talk about that when we get into the offseason, though. Let's focus more on this season. And we got some good injury news today as well. Kodai Senga is planning to pitch a tune-up inning in Syracuse this weekend. This is the end of the season in Syracuse, so last opportunity to do it. There has been a lot of talk that he could be ready to go for that series against the Braves, eligible to return off the 60-day IL on September 25th. So that'd be the second game of that series, Wednesday. Here were some of Senga's quotes in Anthony DeComa's article. He said, Senga said, I've been working my tail off, devoting all my time towards this. Through an interpreter, obviously. I know that if this doesn't go well, I'm just going to be in the dugout rooting for my teammates. So I need to make this work. He said, we're a phenomenal team and the vibes in there are amazing. I need to do whatever it takes to get back out there at 100%, because what I can't do is go back out there at less than 100% and bring the team down. I need to help the team win. He said, nothing's changed on my end as far as which role he'd want to pitch in. He says, I'm ready to pitch whenever. The team wants me as an opener, as a starter from the bullpen, whatever they need. I know the starters in this team have done an amazing job. And however the team wants me to pitch, I'm ready for it. So that's everything you want to hear from Kodai Senga. It certainly feels like, from what Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns have been saying, that they aren't really comfortable with pitching him out of the bullpen. So it would be as an opener. And that's a good weapon to have. So let's just say He throws in an inning. He feels great in Syracuse. He's good to go for Wednesday. And maybe he has, 30 pitches to give. Or maybe it's 40, whatever. They have him for a set amount of time. Okay. You basically can have Kodai Senga and David Peterson both preparing, have Kodai Senga open the game, go against the top of the Braves lineup. Maybe he has a quick inning. He sent him back out there for a second, or maybe it's just one inning. Then David Peterson comes in. They got to decide how they're going to set up their lineup with those two guys. As far as the Braves are concerned, do they put a bunch of righties still in there because they know that Peterson's going to start or pitch a bulk of the game? Who knows? It adds another wrinkle of strategy. If Peterson can thrive in that situation, well, now all of a sudden, maybe he gives you 6-7 innings after Kodai Senga pitched the first. David Peterson can hand the ball right to Edwin Diaz. You could bookend the game with Kodai Senga and Edwin Diaz and have David Peterson pitch the middle. So it's an exciting prospect. Anything out of Kodai Senga is of great benefit. I think in the regular season, the impact is going to be minimal, and it might also be when you get into the wild card round. But if this guy's on a regular schedule, ramping himself up, you might get into an NLDS where Kodai Senga has 60 pitches to give you. And if you can put Kodai Senga in the same game as Jose Quintana, like, all right, you might be cooking with gas here. So this is a really good sign. It's hard to know exactly what you're going to get until, Kodai Senga pitches that inning in Syracuse, looks good, gets activated, has 40 pitches to give in the big leagues. Looks like he's got to pass all these different things. But if the Mets go on a deep run, there's a world that Kodai Senga is a big part of it. So that's some great news. Also, Paul Blackburn let the media know today that he expects to be back either middle or end of next week. So that's even more depth. I'd imagine that the way this could work out, let's just say the Mets are fortunate and they clinch early, so they clinch in that series against the Braves. Well, now you can give Paul Blackburn a start against the Brewers in a game that doesn't really matter for much other than seeding and see what you have. I don't think Paul Blackburn is going to start in the playoffs, but last year the Texas Rangers got around their lack of a good bullpen by having these converted starters in the pen where they could give you some bulk relief. So if the Mets go into October and they have a starting four of Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, David Peterson, and Jose Quintana, but they also have Tyler McGill, Paul Blackburn, and Kodai Senga available in the bullpen or as openers, well, now all of a sudden, you don't have to carry Adam Ottavino and Ryan Stanek in your playoff bullpen. Now it's, we got Jose Budo, Phil Maton, Edwin Diaz, and trying to think of who else you'd want in there. Danny Young probably to give you a lefty. The point is, all of a sudden, Reed Garrett, of course, but it just makes your pitching better overall. So this is a very interesting development. We'll see, how both of those guys progress from here. Last one on the injury notes before we get into our series preview. Brett Batty played today. He went 0 for 4, so that's not great. Struck out 3 times, but he hasn't played in a month. So he DH'd in Syracuse. I don't expect him to really factor in here, but he is depth. So let's just say there's some injury that happens that prevented, whatever it is, an outfielder from going, a left-handed bat. Let's just say I don't even want to put that on anybody, but somebody goes down. Instead of calling on DJ Stewart to be your bat, now, all right, you got Brett Batty. I'd prefer Brett Batty than DJ Stewart. I think that's as far as his role really goes here, but it's definitely interesting. So that's the last on the injury front. Now let's talk about this awesome series we're going to watch unfold at Citi Field this weekend. Mets versus Phillies, playoff atmosphere. Speaking of the playoffs, the Phillies, their magic number to make the playoffs, 1 game. They lost today against the Brewers, losing that series. So that'll have to wait. And that'll probably happen this weekend because if the Braves lose, all right, then the Phillies will clinch a playoff spot. What's interesting about this is their magic number to clinch the NL East is 4 games. So any combination of 4 Phillies wins, 4 Mets losses result in the Phillies making the playoffs as the NL East champion. These 2 teams are playing head-to-head, though. So any Phillies win really counts as 2 for their magic number, so they could clinch as soon as Friday if they win the first 2 games of this series. How is that for some extra incentive, though, for the New York Mets. You have a chance to delay the Phillies from clinching the division and prevent them from having a champagne shower in your house. The last thing the Mets want is for the Phillies to get to have that moment at Citi Field. So go out and win a series. And what makes this even more interesting to me, let's just say the Mets win 2 of the first 3. So the Phillies have one more shot to clinch at Citi Field. Who's pitching on Sunday? Zach Wheeler. Wheeler never got a chance to be part of a division-winning team in his career because the one season when the Mets won the division, 2015, he was out rehabbing from Tommy John. And with the Phillies, yes, he has been part of 2 incredible playoff teams, but they never won the division. They haven't won the division in over a decade, since 2011. So that adds another little layer of intrigue into a series that already has plenty of it. It's going to be awesome to watch these games. And I do think the Mets have the edge in some of these pitching matchups, starting with tonight. Big edge. Luis Severino versus Taijuan Walker. Now, Taijuan Walker did throw 3 scoreless out of the bullpen against the Mets last Saturday, but on the season, he's got a 6.29 ERA. He was pulled from the rotation. Now he's getting put back into it down the stretch. The Mets should be able to score on Taijuan Walker. And Sevy handled the Phillies pretty well until Bryce Harper got him a couple times. I'd like to see a better performance out of Severino in this start on Thursday night. Friday is maybe the most exciting pitching matchup because we just watched it. Christopher Sanchez versus David Peterson in a rematch. That's going to be awesome to see. Game 3, Ranger Suarez versus Sean Manaea. Big edge to the Mets. Sean Manaea obviously pitching like one of the better starters in baseball. But Ranger Suarez, who started the year as a Cy Young candidate, at one point he was maybe even a Cy Young favorite, he's really fallen off. Over his last 15 starts, he's a 4.64 ERA. Over his last 7 starts, he has a 4.79 ERA. So he's been sort of consistently poor for the second half of this season. His whip is around 1.5. So he's given up a base runner and a half per inning. The Mets can get to Ranger Suarez. I think that they have a huge edge in game 1. I wouldn't say huge because Suarez could always lock it in, but they have a huge edge in game 1, and they definitely have an edge in game 3. And we saw David Peterson able to match Christopher Sanchez, who has had the better season because he's been available all year. But I don't think the Phillies have some huge advantage there. Their big advantage will come on Sunday. So if you want to avoid the Phillies clinching in your ballpark, win the first 3 games, because I find it hard to believe the Mets would beat Zach Wheeler the way he's pitching right now. You never know. There's not an announced starter for Sunday. It's either going to be Jose Quintana or Tyler McGill. Now, Quintana would be on 3 days rest. The only reason why I mention him is because, for one, he's on a tear right now. But 2, the Mets have an off day on Monday, and I believe they will set things up for Sean Manaea to start the final game of that series against the Braves because, for one, he's your ace. 2, that sets him up to pitch on regular rest in the NL wildcard in game 1. So I believe the Mets are going to skip Quintana despite the fact that he's been the best pitcher in baseball lately. I think they're going to skip him in that Braves series. So you have a chance on Sunday to pitch him on 3 days rest. Maybe you have him throw 60 pitches, right? He could start the game. McGill could come in for relief as a piggyback, or if you want to flip it, you could. And that would allow you to use both of them before they're not going to pitch again until that final series of the season against the Brewers, if those games matter. If they don't matter, I'm sure McGill would still pitch. Quintana might pitch even, just because you'd be setting him up maybe for a role later on in the playoffs. I don't think he's going to start over David Peterson, even with how good he has been. I still think Peterson's going to get the nod for that Braves series and for a potential playoff series. So as good as he's throwing it, it's going to be interesting what his usage is down the stretch. I wouldn't mind seeing him in some capacity on Sunday if he's up for that. I don't know if he is pitching on short rest, and that's always a wild card anyway, but I think it might be one that's worth going to because you could set yourself up for an interesting piggyback, and maybe that's a way to beat Zach Wheeler. It would be pretty awesome if Quintana and McGill went head-to-head with Zach Wheeler and the Mets came out victorious, or if either of them did. If they're not going to start Quintana on 3 days rest, maybe he's available out of the bullpen in the Atlanta series, and McGill might just get that start on regular rest on Sunday. We'll see. I will be here for every single game. Okay, I'll be breaking down everything as always. You'll get the shows each morning. I'm also going to do one of the postcasts. I'm filling in on Friday night. So on Friday night, if you want to set your calendars, I will be going live on the Locked On Mets YouTube channel and the Locked On New York Sports YouTube channel at the same time, right after the game. So we can have a little bit of a watch party together right when the game ends, hop on, and we'll enjoy, hopefully, a post-game show. But anyway, that is all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. It covers everything in the world of sports, talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.